everybody should have it as easy as I did, even though I only went to college briefly for 6 months. I really wasn't a student. But my father was a journalist, and so was my mother. My father got me many of my jobs. So he got me jobs in the newspaper business, Associated Press when I was 16, and the Daily News when I was 16, and just continued that way. And he got me my first full-time job at the Daily News when I was 19. That's why I dropped out of college. One of the reasons I dropped out of college, I had a full-time job at the New York Daily News, working in sports as a statistician, making excellent money at 19. If it wasn't for my father, I tell everybody, if you want to get into journalism, have a father that can get you a job. You know, this guy kept sending me notes. He bothered me, pestering me, you know. He said, when you do this interview, you know, he talked me into it. I really, at first, I don't do many of these interviews. A couple of them that I've done over the years, they've come back and been pretty negative, actually. Yeah, Sports Illustrated did one on me and my brother way back when, and twisted just about everything that I gave them, and I believe on purpose. So anyway, after a few conversations on Twitter, I was, you know, convinced that this would be good. I do. Only lately, though. I really. All children should ask their parents more about their lives. I certainly knew, you know, key specifics of her life, her journey. From her father was the only one to come back from Australia. His father took everybody to Australia, and he was the only one to come back. And so he was chief steward on the White Star Line. And he worked for a ship called the Majestic. I am named after my grandfather, so I'm going to reveal something here that nobody knows. My real first name is Frederick. And my grandfather's name was Frederick Spencer. And not related to the Spencers. But anyway, so he set up in Liverpool, and she's got some unbelievable stories. I sent a picture of a photo of her address. We had a relative who was living in England and just recently found her address, and she's standing in front of it where my mother was born. And then her two younger brothers, were born in Southampton, and they had moved to Southampton. And then, so she remembers the Lusitania being sunk. She has a memory. She was 4 years old and 3 months, and her mother was carrying one of her brothers, who was 15 months, down to the dock. And she remembers the wives of the crew and everybody else on the ship, the families, all walking down to the Southampton dock. How's that for a memory? So anyway, the Majestic was put out of service because the Titanic was put into the water. And then when the Titanic went down, the Majestic was put into the water. So my grandfather was back on there. And then he decided to come to America. So I believe my mom was about 8 years old when they came. She might have been 11, so I might have that wrong. But then they came to America, and unfortunately, my grandfather died in a car accident. In his 30s. It's terrible. My grandmother's sister, she was part Irish. She was Irish, actually. The sister went to Belgium and saved pilots that were shot down during the Second World War. She got a lot of medals for what she did, but she got caught, and they wound up killing her daughter in a concentration camp. So a lot of history. And I've never been to England, and I've never been to Belgium. And hopefully before I die. Hopefully I see a soccer game in Liverpool. You know, younger people have no idea. Again, I worked only in sports, but when I was young and started to understand what was going on in the sports department, I realized that a lot of stuff that went into that paper was because the sports editor was being paid off. And that was happening in a lot of the papers, maybe not the New York Times, but certainly in the tabloids. They were paid off to put information, publicize boxing, publicize track, harness racing, Even basketball, the NBA was nothing, in the 50s and 60s, even though they had players that turned out to be sensational, like Will Chamberlain and Bill Russell. So anyway, they wanted publicity in the paper, so they would give them tickets, free tickets, and they would give them meals, and they would give them trips up to upstate New York to country clubs. And so that went on for years and years, and I started to catch on like what was going on, and finally it ended for the most part. There was a big article in a magazine, the New York magazine, and somebody wrote an expose on what was going on, these tickets that were being given and all that stuff. And even Madison Square Garden, they had the sites of where everybody's tickets were in the garden, these tickets they were getting for free. So they had it, this big thing. And I was embarrassed because I was getting tickets and my tickets were so bad. I was a young guy and my tickets were way upstairs. I was embarrassed. I wasn't embarrassed I was getting tickets. I was embarrassed on where I was sitting. Today, I believe there's a lot of the same stuff going on. I believe that there's a lot of information, and I believe this is on the front of the paper as well as the back. Is that if you get information from somebody, you're going to take care of that person. Or hopefully a good journalist won't. He'll have the information, and that'd be it. But there's a lot of sports where you get information and you publicize the people who are giving you the information, either to get better jobs, they're leaking stuff to you from teams, and then you try to get them better jobs, or you'll overlook something that they really did badly, not badly, it was unbelievable. There was a coach who he taped a conversation of his other coaches in the coaching room and gave it to management and was caught by the head coach, and he was fired. And that guy wound up getting another job immediately and is still in the NBA and taped the job. But my point is that one of the key writers that covers the NBA totally overlooked that for months because that guy was his source. It honestly did not impact my career. I still have an attitude about it. I thought it was about 10 years overdue that I should have gotten it. But, I'm a tough writer and I took on a lot of people. So the people who were in charge of selecting who gets that award, just would not give it to me for years. And I accepted that. That was fine. And even when they told me I was going to get it, I told the guy who alerted me about it, I was seriously thinking about not accepting it for those reasons, because there was a lot of vindictiveness that was going on. It wasn't based on performance. It was based on you had written something about my friend, and we don't like you. I even auctioned off my award. I really didn't want it, and I think I got $972 for it, and I think they overpaid me by about $971. A friend of mine, this guy Mel Daniels, who's in the Hall of Fame as a player, he wanted me to present him. I was told by the Hall of Fame, he was told by the Hall of Fame that I was not allowed to do it because I'm in the media section of the Hall of Fame, and people in that are not allowed to be presenters. So I said to the boss, Jerry Colangelo, who runs it, I said, so in other words, we're not really in the Hall of Fame. Well, it worked in my favor because I would write the same about the best player on the team, if need be, or the worst player on the team, or the coach of the team, or the owner, or wherever. I didn't pick and choose who I was going to go after. So I know for a fact a lot of players told me that they really respected the fact. Yeah, if it was them that I was going after that day, they didn't like it, but they knew that I really believed what I was writing, and then if something else needed to be said, that I would say it. A lot of the people who I wrote negative things about over the years are some of my best friends today. Only a couple of them maybe were able to understand what I was doing, but over time they recognized what the deal was. So I was still able to get excellent information throughout my career. And even once I retired, I still broke a few, big time stories like LeBron James becoming a Laker. I wrote that was absolutely going to happen. I guaranteed it about 9 months before it happened. There aren't really people who handle it like I do. I have respect for, like Mark Stein, who writes for the New York Times. He does a really good job at reporting, and he doesn't play favorites. There are others. I don't really go out of my way to read a lot of people. If somebody has, a good column or a good something to say, somebody might send it to me and I'll read it. But I'm not online every day checking out what's going on around the league and stuff. I had a lot of respect for Sam Smith, who wrote the Jordan Rules. He still writes about the Bulls, but he doesn't work for a newspaper. He actually works for the Bulls, and he writes something. But he's allowed to write what he wants, and the Bulls pay him though. Bob Ryan, he was writing for the Boston Globe, but he wasn't a writer like me. He had a great passion for the game and great rapport with most players, but he didn't break stories or he didn't break balls. It's God. We were just talking yesterday. I obviously influenced her. She's very caught up in our history. My older brother's kids are in the business also. And she went to college and got a job at a newspaper down in South Carolina. She went to the University of Charleston. And all of a sudden, while she was in school, she's working for a newspaper. And I was surprised. I was. And then she came back from school and got a job, and she's been, working as a journalist ever since. She's a great reporter. She's a great writer. We were talking yesterday, and I was reading her something that I wrote about a player in 1977. I have a lot of my stuff with me where I'm living right now, and I'm trying to write this book. And I just had to read her this, so she understands. She got what I was, reading to her. She liked it. And she was telling me about an obituary she just did and about how she had saved her notes when she spoke to this guy long before. She just decided to save the notes, and then she used all those notes on the obituary. So it turned out great. And so she's sharp. I've written about maybe 7 or 8 chapters. I don't know how many chapters I'll write. I've written my chapters on Larry Bird, Michael Jordan. The other night here in Phoenix, I went out with Walt Frazier, who played for the Knicks. Maybe the best player who ever played for them. People say Patrick Ewing or Willis Reed. It might have been Walt Frazier. So we went out to eat. We'd never gone out to eat the whole time that he was playing. But I wanted to find out what was going through his mind, his life when he got traded by the Knicks back in 1977. And that's why I was reading my daughter something I wrote when he was coming back to play against the Knicks for the first time. Anyway, we went out to eat. So here, he gave me 2.5 hours of a chapter that I never thought that I would do, but every story he told me I'd never heard before. And he was emotional, he was funny, he was forthcoming. It was a great 2.5 hours. So I'm still compiling stuff that's going to go in the book, and I don't know where it's going to come from next. A few weeks ago, Dominique Wilkins, we went out to eat in Phoenix, and he did the same thing. I never expected. I didn't tape it because I didn't expect it. So I wrote it. I have my notes. I went back and I wrote notes, and I'll be able to put that chapter together. But I was blown away by what he had to say. Now, I taped everything with Frazier. I was smart. So that chapter is basically written. I just have to transcribe it. My favorite interviews, without a doubt, is Larry Bird. Every time that I see him. I haven't seen him now in a few years. But even the last time that I saw him in Indianapolis, I was there for. I can't even remember why I was there. But I went to his office at the Pacers office, and we talked for. He didn't know I was coming. He half hour I spent with. I taped it, and it was a great half hour of tape. And I told him at the time that we had traveled. I had traveled with the Celtics back in 1986 on the West Coast. They had like 7 or 8 games, and I traveled with them, and it was the best trip I ever made because After games or on days off, I would go out to eat with Larry Bird and Bill Walton and Rick Carlisle and Jerry Seasting. The five of us would go out to eat. And he was a great storyteller. And nothing was ever off the record with him. So I have all that information, and I've written, like I might have written 3 chapters just on him. And I told him during that half hour, I wanted to go there and find out if my recollections were the same as his. But during that conversation, I said, Larry, you're the one guy that, I wish you had asked me to do your book, because I would have loved to have done it. He was surprised. But who knows? I probably would have never finished it because I'm so slow at doing it. But he inspires me. He's, I said to him during another conversation sometime that, I said, in all those years that I've known you, you've never told me off the record once. And he looked at me and goes, why would I care what you write? He says, I don't read your shit. I don't want to bypass other guys. Julius Erving was the best man at my wedding. He and I are, still talking to this day. So we worked together at NBC. So there are other people, but Bird is he just really makes me giggle. My spontaneity, impulsiveness has probably cost me a lot of money in my life. Taking on people that wound up getting me fired, like, Charles Barkley, taking him on at TNT when we worked together. It never really dawned on me at the time that they would say, really? He's going to stay and you're going to go. So I would say that's probably cost me about $10 million. But aside from the money, there are probably 2 columns in my life that I wish I hadn't written. 2. One I'll tell you flat out was this guy Marvin Webster, who played for the Knicks. He and I were very good friends when he played for Denver and Seattle, and he became a Knick, and he wasn't producing, and I was hurting him in the paper. And I came into a restaurant right next to the Madison Square Garden one day after a game, and he was there with his wife, Madeira, and Madeira embarrassed me. She had a lot to say, and I wrote a column about it. Not good. Did not make me look good. I've looked it up over the years. I still have the column, and I wish I hadn't done that column. And one other one. Again, the biggest tip I have is have a father that can get you a job. But when we started this, there was a call from a young guy who graduated from Michigan State in journalism. I see how difficult it is. I'm trying to help. I've always tried to help young guys get jobs, or help them along, show them information, whatever, conversation. And so he's still trying, and maybe he's got good news for me, because ESPN was going to interview him, and we were able to get him that. Mike Breen, who's the play-by-play analyst for the NBA and for the Knicks, he got him an interview with ESPN for me. So I didn't have a father, but I had a friend named Mike Breen, and maybe this works. So I don't know. I tell every guy, there's so much. I actually wish I could teach a journalism class, because I would use all the things that I wrote and put them up there as situations. What would you do? This is what I did. What would you do? And I think that would be really good, because a lot of stuff I did was not correct. I tell everybody, make sure you read as much as you can, because it doesn't have to be sports. Diversity makes you a better writer. I wish I had read more when I was a kid. But, I would read magazines and newspapers. But I truly believe, you should read as many books as possible and learn. And then you'll use all those words and all those, bring them into your writing, once you're relaxed and you're able to do it. I know this is my top 3, but I just saw A Star Is Born, and I am now officially a Lady Gaga huge fan. It's like, whoa, what a great movie that was, the singing and stuff. I wish she'd leave her makeup off when she's in real life, because she's really pretty, and I loved her nose. I'm a Clint Eastwood freak. Denzel Washington, of course, and third one, I don't know, third one offhand, but Paul Newman. I love Paul Newman. I love the older guys. Jimmy Stewart, anytime I see a picture of Jimmy Stewart, I like, oh man, a movie. My mom and I used to go to movies when I was younger. She'd take me to Jimmy Stewart movies, and so I love him. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to end it on a Denzel Washington story. Okay, I was working in Atlanta for TNT, staying in a nice hotel. Get on my elevator, coming down at about 5 floors or whatever. And there's a guy standing there. And he said to me, he said, I really like your stuff. I like your writing, And I turned to him. He had a baseball cap on. I said, man, I really appreciate that. What do you do? And he goes, I'm Denzel Washington. We actually, became pretty decent friends. And so he'd be at a lot of the Laker games, and I'd be out there a lot. And I saw him sitting at courtside, and I had just seen Training Day, and I was afraid to go up to him. So I don't know, maybe a year or two later, we're out eating in LA. I'm going to drop some names on you. I'm out with Jerry West, and Denzel was at the table. And I told him about being afraid to go up to him. And he said, as well you should. I have a lot of stories. I wish that I could write as quickly as I could speak, and convey a story. Like I haven't written that Denzel story yet, but I have about 5 big time people that I have totally not recognized during the Utah Bulls championship series in, whatever year they played twice. I'm not sure the year. These young guys were in our green room where I was working for NBC, and these young guys were like eating the food and stuff. And, I'd say, who is this guy? Why is this guy allowed in here? And it was Dicaprio. This has happened a lot to me. I have a problem with recognizing people away from where they're supposed to be.